All right, welcome to the Pitch Stack Podcast, Episode 4. Today's April 10th, 5 days after the dreaded banned and restricted announcement. We'll get to that along with some other things. I'm joined as always by Mr. Matthew Rodriguez. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Doing all right. Man, was I exhausted yesterday. You know, I always read about like Gary Kasparov as a kid. He would like play in these chess matches and he'd lose like 10 pounds and then sleep for 3 days afterwards.
Dear God.
Man, as soon as I was done with our skirmish yesterday, I went home and I just couldn't concentrate on anything. I was like, there it goes. There's all the neurons for the whole week. Absolutely gone. But yeah, we played in a skirmish yesterday, and Matt, you kicked the shit out of me.
Yeah, probably as good as any of my games could have possibly gone.
Yeah, I think I landed one attack on you.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
A couple. But yeah.
A couple. Yeah, I think there was one turn you got off something like 16 arcane damage. It was pretty gross.
Yeah, I had 2 Revels. That happens when you have 2 Revels.
So if you haven't guessed already, Matt was on Viserai, OTK Viserai, and I was on Kasai, which is a weird deck. It's too, it shouldn't be a complicated deck, but I think as I get older, it becomes harder to think. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I felt like I had a pretty good tournament. Up until the top 8, you were my only loss. I made it to the finals, and I got smoked by Kano.
Ironically,
with a 23 damage turn.
Ironically, though, you made it to the finals. Yeah, and I lost out in top 8 the first round. So,
what deck did you end up losing to?
Well, in Swiss I was 4 rounds, so I went 3-1. I only lost to what was it? Jeez, I lost to Jonathan. That was my only Jonathan on Bravo, vanilla Bravo, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, good old Bravo, man. He's kind of a menace.
Usually, yeah, that deck's sick. I don't know. Usually I like to do a viewer question segment, but I feel like the viewer questions we got this week are so topical, we might as well just pepper them in. So, Jonathan Owens, future Pro Tour competitor, likely champion, he sent in a question this week, and he wants to know what we think about Starvo and Blitz. Now, I didn't face John yesterday, but you did. So what do you think of that deck?
Bravo was like... it was close match for the two of us, actually. I mean, he has an insane record on that deck, but Bravo, Showstopper, and Blitz is like insane. I've watched that deck play against other decks. But our game... it cut down to the wire. Like, he even had if he hadn't had like that sigil ready to go, he would have died for sure, because we ended the game like where he was at 3 life. He had been at 1 life earlier and he had sigiled, but he got me down and beat me up. So, but yeah, that was probably his closest game that night. I lost that one, but I still made top 8, and then sadly I got a little greedy and played a Sonata after whiffing once, and I whiffed twice. And had no thing to do that turn, expecting I would hit at least some other attack. And I passed it to the brute player, who just good old Max, who absolutely just clobbered me. And then he went on. So that was sweet. Good for him. And then the other games I played that day, round 1 were you. Round 2, I played against... actually, I'm pretty sure I played against Max and I won. But we faced off in the... top 8 again, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe, yeah. And then I played against Hasiel, mirror match, Viserai, and I took that one. And then, yeah, that was essentially my day.
Yeah.
How about you?
I had a weird day on Kasai. I had some weird matches. So I got absolutely stomped by you, and I had been on like a 7-game losing streak with Kasai at that point. And shout out to my friend Jake Kissel, because the last time he stomped me, I mentioned to him that I felt like I had reached a skill ceiling at the game where I wasn't sure what to get better at. And he kind of like sat down with me and he was like, he kind of showed me like this cool order of operations to look at your equipment and like the order you're blocking in and using your equipment and like how to maximize your blocked resources with said equipment. And it really, I don't know, I feel like it helped my Kasai game go up to the next level. Because immediately after losing you, I ended up beating Jake, just barely. It was a really good game. He was on Rhinar, and that Intimidate is just absolutely brutal. And then after that, I went up against a Prism player, which was bizarre. I felt like that was a very bad matchup for the Prism player because just Kasai, you're just going to ping him with one sword, pop his aura every single turn. And I don't know. I think after that, I ended up playing against Hasiel Diaz, the greatest Guardian player in the world, who was on Viserai.
AKA Jason Red Hat.
Yeah, aka Jason Red Hat. And he was on Viserai. And that game came down to the wire. And I feel like I drew very well. And I kind of knew what cards to look out for after playing against your version of Viserai. And I got to live the dream where I was able to pitch my entire hand on his OTK turn to get rid of most of the like rune chant damage. And then I got to live the Kasai dream, which if you're unaware is when you have 6 copper tokens, a Blood Honor Hands in Arsenal, and your Courage of Bladehold still up. So you are able to pop your Courage of Bladehold and then swing for 3-4 times with your swords for free.
Damn, that's so gross.
And I ended up getting over because he was down to 1 life and only had an attack action hand, which buffed my last sword. Then from there, I played the Prism player again in the top 8. Then I played Max, who was on Brute in the top 4. And then in the finals, of course, I play against Carlos. We said it here last week. I'll say it here again. Likely the greatest Kano player in the world. And man, I swung for lethal, and then he came right back with 23 damage. So
yeah, that was insane, dude.
Yeah.
Kano kind of just freaking pops off, man, like out of nowhere. And I don't know, man, he just understands the deck. He understands, you know, his outs. He knows, you know, he knows what he's played, what he hasn't played, what he's pitched, right? He's a very, very skilled player.
Yeah, he plays it like a really good Hold'em player, where he's like, if I do this, like, I mean, I would imagine, like, you know, statistically, I need to opt into one of these 3 cards. And just, he plays like, I don't know, he plays very, just his lines of play are incredibly straightforward and constantly making the optimal decisions. And when you run into a Kano player like that, my God, you have to get lucky to beat them.
It's tough, man. It really is tough. Me and him, we go at it a lot with Viserai and Kano. And in CC, I mean, it ends up just turning into me racing him as fast as I possibly can, getting him down as low as possible, and then him just like burning me out right at the last second, you know?
Yeah.
Most of the time it goes to Kano. But it's been interesting in Blitz because Blitz is really where Kano has his way, you know?
Absolutely.
Everyone's at half their life total. He does about the same amount of damage as he normally does anyways, so everyone's in kill range essentially.
They got to start Kano at 5 life. I think that's what they should do instead of 15. We should just start at 5. I think that would be fair.
Wouldn't stand a chance in CC with 20 life even.
Yeah, right? Well, this week in Flesh and Blood, we had a couple big announcements. We had the BNR announcement, which we'll get to. We had the Monarch first edition print run announced. We had a new hero announced. So there's a lot to talk about, and we'll get to it right after the intro.
Let's go.
You're listening to the Pitch Stack Podcast.
All right, and we're back. Matt, I think we'll get to the biggest news first. And I think the news that involves, well, I think up until 2 days ago, it involved the most speculation. But I believe that this banned and restricted announcement it seemed to have a lot of, I don't want to say veiled intentions, but it certainly left me with a lot of questions afterwards when they said no bans, no changes. So what do you think, Matt?
Man, this I haven't seen the community this divided, honestly. The BNR announcement came right where everyone was expecting there to be some kind of announcement, some sort of addressment of like the Starvo issue, the big triangle issue with Prism and Viserai and Starvo, of course. But yeah, no changes. And additionally, they announced a new BNR reassessment date on May 2nd, which essentially would be at the end of all remaining Living Legend points events before Pro Tour. Pro Tour 1, that is. And yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp that I think that the current decision was the right decision, that the meta is still very new, and that I do think there are some avenues that haven't been explored yet. I'm not really the greatest, deck techer or, experimenter in that regard, but I feel like there's a lot of things that haven't been looked at yet in regard to solving the problem with Starvo or Prism or Viserai. But I think really their intention is for Starvo to gain the last remaining Living Legend points, which initially didn't seem like there were going to be enough points for him to gain from the events remaining. But they did announce that there would be 2 additional CC events in that time span from now until May 2nd. So he has plenty of opportunity to win those events and take the first crown for Living Legend, hopefully. And if not, well, we'll see what they decide to do May 2nd. If they decide to put their foot down and do something about Starvo, or if they let him run wild into Pro Tour. I think that may be a mistake. But I do think that, like we discussed this before, there definitely was some intention behind Starvo. But at the same time, they do have a track record of not really preparing for the effects of certain cards being introduced to the game, with the Duskblade banning and Seeds of Agony not being tested correctly. There's a lot of issues that they've had in the past with testing cards, so it wouldn't surprise me if they decided that they were going to have to ban him or something preemptively.
Yeah, I was joking about this yesterday after the skirmish. Me, you, and a couple other guys, we all went and we got food afterwards. And I was joking about this. And it's like, is LSS's internal testing system toxic enough? what's the question I asked, Like, maybe New Zealand's just it's the third greatest country to live in the world. It has one of the best work-life balances. Maybe they're just not stressed out enough to get sweaty in play testing.
That's funny. I think they probably should look into reaching out to pros, right? To test the stuff. But at the same time, I think that there's of course the, I don't know, there's a bit of an issue with like if somebody is going to remain a pro, having that information early, it's very, very valuable information. So I don't know, they'd have to, give up the opportunity to compete perhaps, but of course they'd get a nice job.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a bit of a trade-off
I think that
there.
happened with Ian Duke back in the day. Reed Duke's brother gave up his opportunities to compete to go work for Wizards R&D.
I didn't know he did. I didn't know
he's
he
still one of their main set designers to this day.
Wow.
But, it's interesting. So the no bans, I think I agree with. I think there's nothing wrong with a rock, paper, scissors meta. I think that's fine. I think really, if there is an issue with Starvo, it's that the deck isn't all that difficult to pilot. I think that would be why people, maybe why it's so dominant is because the amount of people that can just pick it up and play to a good result. Don't get me wrong, the most skilled Starvo player is still going to beat a less skilled Starvo player every single time. But without having that initial skill curve as high as it is for other decks, maybe that's why we're seeing so many high results from the deck. And I think it's interesting that I know a lot of people thought this was kind of controversial, but for LSS to change some of their skirmishes and events, 2cc from Blitz, I think actually is a really good decision. Like not just in terms of like, oh look, now Starvo can get Living Legend. Like I know it looks that way. I don't think that's really the entire I don't think that's the whole reason they're doing it. I think it's giving them a chance to gather more CC data on a highly competitive level. Because I think there's like a lot more pieces than Starvo that they're looking at. You know, this is a professional
100%.
game design company. They have a lot going on. They're looking at a lot of different things. And, you know, I would imagine that there's cards that they're worried about that we haven't even thought of. You know, I'd imagine they do print bad cards, but like, especially with the Duskblade scenario, but they're so quick to call themselves out on their own mistake that I think they must be conflicted about something here. And I think what this leads into is like with Magic the Gathering's pro scene, one thing that would always happen at Magic Pro Tours is it would be right after a new set got released. And because there won't be a set released right before this Pro Tour, the deck building and team strategy metagaming aspect of being a professional player won't be tested unless they shake the meta up right before, you know, the Pro Tour happens.
Yeah. I think we should, at least for the sake of, you know, being prepared, we should expect something to happen on May 2nd. I don't know what. And back to what you're saying, you know, I think they're treading cautiously because they don't want to set a precedent, I think. Right.
Yeah.
And this is like the first time a hero has been so like, you know, rampant, right? It's been so, I mean, obviously Shane and Briar were problems, but I think this is the first time a hero has been so clearly defined as a very unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And it's been very difficult for many decks to deal with. With Shane, he had bad matchups, but a lot of the time, you know, he can just like have a really good turn and then just turn that matchup on its head. Briar also had an issue of being extremely easy to play and also being really, really strong. But I do think that there were some times where decks had 50-50 chances, right? You were still pretty well slated to have a chance to beat that deck. But it feels right now that most decks coming up against Starvo have either that 50-50 or worse matchup.
Yeah. It certainly seems that way. Like I would say Prism is probably the closest at like maybe a 49%. Yeah, I don't know.
Even the Viceroy matchup, I mean, you try to go OTK against him because you can't put enough pressure being aggressive. And even with that, depending on how well he gets his like dominate turns and what kind of attacks he draws, like you're just going to get crushed before you get a certain amount of rune chance. And then of course there's the variance as well. If you're not drawing your defense reactions early, they're still left in your deck when you try to combo off. It's not going to be enough if you hit 2 or 3 of those and then you miss on some of your attacks. You only get 3 attacks out of something like that. That's not good enough. That's not going to close the game out. And he's going to be left with 15 life and you're going to be back again trying to attack and take him down. And it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and you know, I meant to say this when John was asking what we thought about Bravo and the Blitz meta, but it's interesting how Guardian, like the Bravo Blitz deck and the Starvo deck, have both kind of taken this defensive approach where, like, and I think it makes so much sense in Blitz with just regular Bravo. Like, it makes sense in a 40 card format to be able to exhaust your opponent. You know, like, I mean, going for the exhaustion win is obviously a way to win. It's like, you know, you can mill in Magic, and it makes sense for Guardian to be able to do that. And I think what's weird about this Guardian is it's so rare for this particular Guardian build in Starvo to take a turn off, just to like prevent a bunch of damage, which seems to me to be the way that Guardian's built, is to take turns off and then come back stronger. And for me, Starvo just kind of looks like, I don't feel like the deck should be this consistent.
Right. Agreed. I mean, the depends on what versions you're running. You know, there are some versions that have nearly 60 something % chance to just hit all 3 elements every single turn, right? And then you can sandbag those pulses and just hold on to them.
Yeah, especially with Crown of Seeds. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That said, though, the rock, paper, scissors meta, I'm okay with it for the time being. And there is something that I thought about yesterday. So average cost of a blitz deck. And follow me. I know it seems like a left turn. Average cost of a blitz deck, right? $11.99. You grab 2 of those, you start playing for $23.98 US. This Dorinthia versus Rhinar 2 blitz deck set is retailing for $49.99 is the suggested retail price. I think that we may see very specific buffs to 2 heroes in Rhinar and Dory before this Pro Tour. Like, even though these are blitz decks, they are still getting new Warrior and new Brute cards. And that could also shake up the meta.
Interesting. That is something I hadn't considered. We already seen one of those specialization cards for Dory, and it's phenomenal. But I don't know if that's enough to quite give Dory what she needs. But I do think that there could be something in there for those decks. The contents of that box are essentially the 2 decks and a lore book, which comes out to $50. But the 2 decks, they say they're going to be printing equipment as well. So those equipment may be new staples for these heroes. So I guess that's something to look forward to for sure. And I think that releases before Pro Tour?
Yeah, it does.
What, the second week of May?
Yeah, I want to double check that. What is it? They're calling classic battles. But you know what's interesting though, right? With that price, like every blitz deck comes with common and rare equipment, right? So like obviously there's going to be a few Majestics in there. And so the question is it going to be chase cards for Warrior and Brute? Or are we going to see like Art of War and Light and Strike, Command and Conquer in a reprint in this particular setup? And I think it has to be one of those things.
That would be interesting. Welcome, even. I just hope that their supply is enough for the people that were going to start like buying and hoarding these things. Yeah, I mean,
right.
You got a free Command and Conquer equipment and like staple Majestics for heroes in one box. Yeah, sure. Sign me up. I'll buy a bunch.
Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. It's actually 2 weeks after the Pro Tour this comes out.
Yeah. I thought it might have been after the Pro Tour.
Well, darn it.
Yeah.
There was so much for all my cool theory
Pro Tour
crafting.
2. Pro Tour in France.
Pro Tour 2 in France.
Europe.
The sequel. Pro Tour 2 Origins.
Electric Boogaloo.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You talk about people hoarding these. You talk about value of cards. You know, the other big announcement we saw this week, and this to me is so fascinating because of the way Flesh and Blood is treated by the community. But we saw the Monarch first edition print run get published.
Yeah.
And it was about 10 times that of Alpha or Arcane first edition, and close to 4 times that of Crucible. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that were hoarding these first edition Monarch boxes that are probably, I don't know. Do you think that people were expecting there to be less of these?
It depends on who you ask. But I do think that there was a significant issue with their decision or their I guess whatever their contractual partnership is like with Channel Fireball. Right. The big issue was that Channel Fireball had massive numbers of pallets of this product, both this and Tails, and they held it, you know, and then they started they started Card Shop Live, presumably, and then they just started pumping and dumping, you know?
Yeah.
And it caused a big fuss during the time when these were still like new products, and people were thinking, oh man, the print run's insane. It's got to be to the moon because there's so much of this. People aren't even paying like, you know, at first the prices for Monarch first edition were like $200-$300. I remember I got my friend to buy a couple of them because at the time I couldn't really do it myself. You know, I know somebody else who bought a case and they weren't really players of the game. They just thought, hey, this first edition of Flesh and Blood. Look at Crucible, right? Look at Arcane Rising. This is a good investment. So they spent the $200-$300, and well, I mean, now you can look at for Monarch boxes at 150, but that's not the point. I mean, long term, it's still probably decent. But it wasn't like a quick turnaround like the other ones. It wasn't something that people expect. It wasn't what people were expecting, because a lot of people bought in at that high price range. And then soon enough, we saw these boxes well below 200, up until essentially now. And then even now, people aren't very confident in that number that they put out. 125,000 boxes is a lot, but I don't think it is comparatively to the number of people who have started playing the game since then. Because I feel like I don't know where I've listened to several content creators discuss this. They share similar sentiments about the growth of the game compared to the amount of boxes printed for Monarch and Crucible. And I think that the growth of the game outdoes that, outnumbers that. So perhaps this isn't a terribly bad number, but, just kind of what we should start expecting from, the forward first edition print runs. Now, Tales of Aria might be in the same situation where like there's so much product being hoarded by a few people that it seems like there's, a lot of it out there, and they were just pumping it, during the first month of it. And then even then, since then, it's been very easy to find and very cheap.
Yeah,
you can buy it for like $80 right now.
Yeah. And I think Tales of Aria, to me, the game really exploded with Monarch's release. I think that whole period of time, like people were returning to play in LGS's, like trading card investment culture was at like the all-time high, and was probably the highest it had been in 20 years. And, Monarch came out then. That's when the game really exploded. And I think if I'm LSS, I saw those Monarch numbers and I called up Cardamundi and I was like, yeah, whatever we're doing for Tales of Aria, double it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think we're going to see that Tales of Aria is going to have maybe an even larger, like maybe even 200,000 displays as the print run. And it's going to be awkward because Tales of Aria has this problem where the Achilles heel of that set is it's too narrow. Like it only supports the 3 heroes in that set.
Mostly, yeah, 100%.
I mean, you could kind of argue the same thing with Monarch. But Monarch in and of itself, I feel like the heroes were more widely played and more popular than the Tales of Aria heroes. And that kind of set this weird precedent of just like, a 3-hero set, it's just too narrow. Really, the only thing you can pull out of any of those boxes where you're assured to make your money back is like if you pull a legendary equipment. I mean, there's zero price difference amongst any of the first edition mythics. And like, almost any cold foil you hit, if it's not a mythic or a legendary, you're looking at another $20 card that you're just sitting on. And I think when you get to those price differences, and you see the same thing with Monarch, right? Where really only the cold foils are the things that have a price multiplier. From the first edition to the unlimited, like the vast majority of first edition Majestics versus unlimited Majestics for Monarch, there really isn't a price difference between the two. Like you're looking at $1 tops,
Yeah.
And when we see that, and I know you brought this up earlier, like now every single set is out of print. They're not printing anything.
This wasn't officially announced, but they've adjusted their website to reflect that Tales of Aria and Monarch Unlimited are out of print. Of course, we got the announcement for Everfest already earlier last month, but they just updated the website to show those sets out of print.
So, do you think it's safe to say that we're not going to see Everfest Unlimited, and that this is the beginning of Fab 2.0?
I think so. It's hard to say. Everfest has only been out for a couple months, and
just over 2 months as we're recording this.
Right, and Tales of Aria. Unlimited didn't come out for a while. Tales of Aria Unlimited, I remember, came out in September. We had first edition still in November, and by maybe December, like I think maybe the back end of December, Unlimited finally came out, or the middle of December. So I mean, we're talking like 3-ish months. So I think by next month we will know if any kind of Everfest Unlimited is coming, though it seems dubious.
Yeah, that was mid-December this year. From Channel Fireball, I got a first edition box of Tales of Aria, all 3 Blitz decks, and a Channel Mount Heroic playmat all together bundled up for $110. So obviously, Channel Fireball knew that they had a lot of this. They're basically, at that point, based on the price and like everything, they're basically just giving Blitz decks away.
Yeah, which they weren't too popular considering the skill level or like the mechanics level of those cards for newer players.
Yeah, and it's weird. So there's actually two separate directions I want to take this conversation in, because I think there's 2 very interesting things to consider with the current model. I know they've got to be moving to Fab 2.0. I don't think we're going to see Everfest Unlimited. I think just based on the amount of first edition Everfest that you're just seeing everywhere. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, if it was anywhere near the print runs of even Monarch or Toa, like you would be like, oh, you guys still have Everfest. Cool. But
yeah.
you go to any LGS and it's like they got a case of them in the back just ready for you to ask about. So I think it's interesting when we then go to average box value and expected value of a box. So, and the thing that brings me to this is I just bought my friend Mike, they had the Magic Pro announcements coming out. And my friend Mike, he decided he was going to build a bunch of modern decks. And he decided that he was going to focus on Magic, cash out of Flesh and Blood. So people like that do exist. They are out there. I've only met one of them. But he decided, so his entire collection was a Blitz deck and a box of Welcome to Wraith. And he hit on the best non-legendary hit you can hit with Welcome to Wraith, which is an Enlightened Strike. He had buy a box promos, all sorts of cool stuff, and valued out at TCG Market. His whole collection was worth $45, including 33 from that Enlightened Strike. And I think it's really interesting when we look at box prices where, like, let's say if you hit like a really good box of Welcome to Wraith, you would expect to make your money back. And we're seeing them at MSRP like $60, $70. Like, really, if you don't hit a foil E-Strike, a foil of any of the 3 or 4 Chase Majestics, or a legendary equipment, you're not making your money back. And so, like, chances are now there's 1 box of Wraith unlimited per case that will allow you to make the money you're putting into it back. And I know people always say buy singles, but at the end of the day, if you buy a bunch of boxes, technically the price should be in a way where it averages out, right? Like, you buy 3 boxes at $60, you should expect to get somewhere between like $170 to $200 worth of cards. And we're seeing boxes where if you just don't hit that piece of legendary equipment or one of the few Chase Mythics, you like lose out on it. And I think what's really bizarre is I think what's happening is there is a lot more Flesh and Blood in circulation than anybody realizes. I mean, we don't see a single unlimited print run number that they've put out. And what this would cause is, like, for the chase cards to be the actual, to be the things that are actually still holding value, where everything else just goes to zero because so much of it's been opened. And it's really interesting. So all that aside, that's a lot of setup, a lot of information at once. I know. It brings me to a question. Do you think LSS should move their model from 1 legendary per case to 1 per box?
Interesting. I don't know. That's my answer, is I don't know. I don't either. I want to say yes, I want more legendaries, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did do it. I mean, we're talking about Fab 2.0, right? If we want to move away from like a first and unlimited model, let's get some of those, legendaries out there, more of them out there, But then again, you're still going to sacrifice the value of those legendaries, which is good, right? This is all still good, meaning your boxes will be better and singles will be cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, singles being cheaper is like ideal, right? This is a game. This is a game, right? We're playing it. So collectors will still get to have their chase cards and fabled and cold foils potentially. I don't know what they're going to be doing with how they're going to print their boxes moving forward. Hopefully, there's still some kind of like way for collectors to search for something, right? Because Magic, I think, has figured it out a little bit, and I know everyone's super frustrated with like, you have 4 or 5 different versions of the same exact card. You open a box, it's not even exciting because it's like, well, I've got this really cool looking card, and it's like 10 cents.
I got this foil Planeswalker, 85 cents.
Exactly. So, but what is great about that though is that they're still selling product. People are getting singles as cheap as ever before. I mean, Jin-Gitaxias was like the strongest card in that entire set, arguably, of the Kamigawa set. Like one of the coolest, most chasest cards in that whole set. And the Phyrexian version is like less than $20.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like, I remember when Call Time came out. This is like when they first started doing set booster boxes. Phyrexian Vorinclex, which is a lot stronger, to be fair, than Jin-Gitaxias. But that was like a $40, $50 Phyrexian card. If you got a foil one,
yeah, foil one's like $150.
You pay for the whole freaking box and double. I'm not sure what the prices are like now, but I think that continuing to print multiple versions of cards and stuff, or just making sure cards pop up more frequently, like with set booster boxes and stuff, is a good idea. And people will keep chasing for those cards. More singles will hit the market; they'll be cheaper. And I think that's what we should be. I think that's what Fab should be aiming for.
Yeah.
I don't know if necessarily they need to. Sorry, I don't know if they necessarily need to give like alternate art treatments to every card, but I do like what they did with Everfest, where people who really want like the bling version, they'll get the full art version and pay the $10 for that one full art version, or $5 or whatever it is, and then the regular card for that set, for that regular Majestic, is much cheaper, or the regular rare is much cheaper because so much of it is out there.
Yeah. And you made the point that I was just about to make. I think you hit the nail on the head, where I think Everfest, they're testing a lot of Fab 2.0 concepts. We see Earthbore Bounty. There's 2 different arts. There's extended art. We're seeing a lot of the Majestics have extended art that gives them a very nice price multiplier. Even the rares, the playable rares have a nice price addition with the extended arts. You see, like even Starvo has, his own cold foil chase card within it. And I think what this lets them do is, I don't think LSS felt good about when they reprinted Skullcap and Tunic of having them be non-foil. I don't think they liked that. So if we're seeing this new phase of Fab 2.0 where there is no unlimited printing, the idea of whenever, I don't know, whenever I know this is like the worst example, but like whenever Silver Palms sees a reprint, if it's rainbow foil instead of cold foil, it still lines up with their original reprinting mission statement. And it makes it so like it makes it so the card doesn't feel less special, which I feel like is what happened with the Dullcap and the Krunic, where suddenly it was like the economy class version, where it was like, here's this purely utilitarian version of the card. And I don't know if they necessarily like that, because I think LSS wants there to be that discovering treasure feeling of opening up a legendary. And the idea of a non-foil legendary seems to be not line up with the product feel that they've been going for.
And what's funny is that both those cards are like not that far off from the price of the original, like the original rainbow foil, not cold foil, obviously. But the original rainbow foil of those cards, at least Tunic. I don't know if Skullcap is still like 130 or something.
I do believe I think Skullcap there's a decent gap. I'm actually going to look that up.
But I remember Tunic always being very close. They're very trailing closely to each other. The WTR one and the Crucible one.
There's about a $50 difference between the Arcane Rising and the Everfest.
Understandable. Arcane Rising, though, it being the set it is, for sure. But yeah, I mean, like, it's still saving money, even if it's $10 on Tunic or $50 on Skullcap for playability reasons. I think those cards, I like that they exist non-foil.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think you're right. That maybe that is the utilitarian, like maybe that is a good idea, where they printed these things that are just such staples, for them to exist in a cheaper non-foil way makes a lot of sense. But then I guess the question, as we talk about print runs, comes, and is the Krunic and the original WTR Tunic, are they similar in price because the print runs were about equal, as opposed to just Everfest there seems to be a giant flood of, and is that what's keeping the gap in the two skull caps, you know?
I'm not sure. I think it's probably more to do with aesthetics, and also playability. Yeah. I mean, the Tunic is a staple for a lot of decks, but not every deck, right? And almost, and I don't know. There's so few decks that don't want a skull cap, right? That in addition to Arcane Rising being out of print sooner than WTR Unlimited, WTR Unlimited still being like extremely available everywhere. I think that really affects the price of the Tunic and Crucible. And also Crucible was the first to be called out of print, and it's still very available and still very affordable.
Yeah, that's very true.
But Arcane Rising somehow is nowhere to be found, just nearly. And the prices for that has gone up to about $80 to $90 a box. So there's definitely a supply difference between those three unlimited sets and the availability.
Yeah. And I think there's just so many chase cards in Arcane Rising amongst the Majestics. I mean, if you hit on any of the chase Majestics in Arcane Rising, it's better than hitting any single card in Everfest other than Grandeur of Valahai, which is crazy to think about. And that includes extended arts. Outside of Aether Wildfire.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to Fab 2.0. I don't think we're going to see Everfest Unlimited, but you're right. They do have a nice gap between the two. So who's to say if this is the beginning of Fab 2.0 or not? Now, Matt, I know I mentioned that there was another point of discussion I wanted to bring up here when it involves the print runs of these boxes and what we're looking at. And this is something that I think is interesting. And it's actually, it's I don't want to say it's difficult for me to talk about, but it's not something that I immediately was like, oh, weird. Like when I first started reading about this, it wasn't a direction I wanted to think in. And, a lot of us think of LSS as like, they're the shining mountain on a hill. They're the company that we wish WotC was, They handle the bans well. Like, obviously, there's a few things wrong with LSS and their play testing, but obviously they're still small. They're just getting started. And so many of us have so much faith in LSS that I don't really think LSS is who I'm levying this criticism at. I think it's more the major retailers. But you look at this, and do you think, and this is a very interesting question, do you think that it might be unethical for LSS to be holding back print run numbers? Which initially, when I was asked this, I was like, oh, that's weird. I hadn't really even considered that. And it took me a second to think about it. That's why I'll keep talking about it, because it was such a weird concept to me to think about. But when you look at like what happened with Card Shop Live, where they knew they had pallets of this stuff and they kind of tried to sell certain first editions as chase boxes, And it's kind of like, I know this is the classic analogy, and I hate to be like the 10,000th person bringing it up, but it's kind of like what De Beers does with diamonds. They have like a billion of them sitting in a warehouse somewhere, but they're like, no, it's super rare.
Gotcha. I don't know that it is unethical. I mean, okay, comparatively to every other card game, I mean, Magic has never released a print number.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
I mean, I understand how Magic like runs their printings typically for like standard products or collector boosters and stuff like that. But most people, I think, not most people, but a good chunk of players understand how they print cards and how they print the sets, right? Usually print standard to demand. Once demand drops, it's out. Not demand, you know what I mean? Like they'll drop the printing once they need to free up the printing space for another set, right? And the set's not, moving as fast. But collector booster boxes are usually just one print run, right? But it's a large amount and they push it out in waves. And then as far as like other master type sets or like, Commander Legend type sets, they could usually be, depending on what kind of set it is, print to demand, the same thing. As far as people want it, and as long as we can use the printer space, they'll print it, right? Commander Legends was printed a lot for a long time. But master sets are usually a lot fewer, a lot shorter printed. Unless they do something like they did, like oddly with Eternal Masters. I don't know if you remember that set. They pushed out the original printing, and then for Christmas time, they pushed out a brand new printing of it again for the holidays.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually didn't know they did it in waves.
Yeah, sometimes they do. But it may be just that they have pallets and they hold them, right? Or they print again, and then they send out more. But I think LSS being transparent with the numbers is something that no other game company has done. Or as far as I understand, no other successful game company has done. And they've done it to good success. Like, this is something that they have been very transparent about since the beginning, since they started the game, essentially. We've known the print runs for first editions of everything up until right now. We just got the Monarch numbers, and eventually I'm sure we'll get the Tales of Aria numbers and the Everfest numbers once these sets have fully, made their way around.
Yeah. No, you know what? I think that makes sense. And when I saw that question posed, I sat and I thought about it. And, you raised such an interesting point that changed my entire view on the entire thing, which is, hey, this is the only TCG that's showing you print runs, so you can be aware of how scarce your sealed box is, I mean,
though, to be fair, go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm saying, to be fair, though, I don't know if that just necessarily makes like just removes all possible criticism for them, meaning just because nobody else is doing it and then that they're doing it only a little slightly delayed, I don't know if that's still ethical. You know what I mean? Like, maybe the ethical thing would be for all game companies to reveal all of their print run numbers whenever the set drops. Yeah, but I mean, that's not really reasonable for at least a money-making company. That's not reasonable. It's totally understandable why game companies don't do it, right? But if we want to talk about the best choice for the player would be for them to know the numbers of all print runs as soon as that's come out. But I do commend LSS for releasing those numbers because nobody else does. Now, I don't know if you understand the difference between what I was trying to explain, but.
Yeah, I think I get it. Obviously, maybe there are maybe it's problematic that they're not releasing them immediately if they're going to release them, but the fact that they're doing it in the first place puts them ahead of other
absolutely
companies.
Yeah, definitely ahead. Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because it all ties back to the very fundamental concept of a trading card game, which is the difference between a trading card game and a game of chess is that your game pieces have a secondary use as a financial instrument. And when you're kind of guessing at the scarcity of the print run and you're using pure supply and demand, I think it's kind of good for the game because it creates a player's market for prices as opposed to a collector's market where you're just going to grab these cards, put them on a shelf, and try to recapture what happened when you didn't throw away your Pokemon base set cards. And
Jeez.
I don't know. It's interesting because you get into the idea of if they release those numbers initially, maybe it becomes too much of a collector's market. And maybe by holding those numbers back for a little bit, you allow card prices to settle where they're at in demands for people's willingness to pay to stay competitive in the game versus the amount of cards in circulation.
I do think I like the way they've done things.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I do like the way they've done things.
You know, I know the way they do announcements and stuff for the banning and whatnot has been good as well, as far as announcing events and the prize support for those events as well. It's all been, I think LSS has done a very good job of being transparent and communicative.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to our last topic, speaking of a collector's market and holding on to cards for no purpose other than to hope that they're worth more in the future, we have viewer question today from our friend Max. And Max asked, do you think it's wise to start investing in a UPF deck if the format becomes more credible? And what do you think the meta looks like? Where do you see UPF in the future? Now, I don't necessarily have good answers to a lot of those questions.
I have a good answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Never. But I do think, though, a demand for those fun, exciting interactions for UPF could drive the price of certain cards if the demand is high enough. Right now, I don't think that player base or the card base really supports a very in-depth and complex UPF format, right? Not if we want to treat UPF a little bit, if we want to compare UPF to Commander, right?
Yeah, I think you have to.
I think it's got a long way to go. It's not unplayable, right? And maybe if you introduce your own house rules or your own mechanics and stuff, those things can gain traction and become more popular, right? And things that can kind of drive the prices of cards like the talismans and potions and stuff, right? If you give heroes a talisman slot, an amulet slot, and then 2 potion slots or something, right?
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. Just house rules and stuff for UPF. Or PvE even, right? There are already PvE formats that exist. I haven't really looked at or played any of them. But I just don't think that for future financial value or anything like that, I don't think that UPF will really have much of that. Though for metas, of course, that's all just going to depend on who can interact with the most players the most amount of times. And I think that usually ends up being Kano, because he's got cards that deal damage to each. He's got cards like chain lightning that deal damage to each opposing hero or target heroes and stuff. Or what's funny is another interaction is that when rune chants pop, they say deal damage to target hero.
Yeah.
So you can attack with a rune chant on one player. You can attack with a rune flash on some player, and they'll rune chant over there, rune chant over there, rune chant over there.
Yeah, you can spread the love. You can play politics with the rune chants on the stack.
So I think a lot of those cards, those fun cards that interact with multiple players or say each player, those are going to be the ones I think that are going to be the most desirable for UPF.
Yeah. And and the reason Max brings this up is I mentioned it to him over lunch the other day that I was comparing it to my experience with Magic the Gathering and how I saw so many rare cards that were just sitting in my bulk box worth 10, 15 cents. Suddenly, Wizards started printing Commander decks. They started showing the format some love, and then the format became more and more popular to the point where I was finding $30, $40, $50 cards in my bulk rare box. Stuff where I was really disappointed to open in the past was suddenly a card. I was like, oh, this needs to go in the special binder. And I can kind of see that possibly happening in the future with Flesh and Blood. But I think you're right, though, where the only thing that you can really speculate on other than Cold Foil Dustblade, as we all know, the easiest spec of all time.
Yeah. Cheapest.
is the ones that interact with multiple opponents. I think you nailed it. That those are probably, if you're trying to put some cards away. And the items?
And the items. The talismans and amulets. Those cold foil talisman and amulets, do not sleep on those. Do not.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Make sure you get one of each. This is not financial advice.
Most certainly is not.
I think most players' collections, as long as if they have open boxes of all the sets and stuff, I think most players' collections will slowly gain value over time as metas change, new heroes are introduced, and more mechanics are introduced. Older cards will all of a sudden out of nowhere be like, oh, I interact really well with that, and then you have a rare from like WTR or Arcane Rising all of a sudden become, a $10 card. Because like, oh, that's out of print. I need that card for my deck.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I don't know. I needed some reserve list cards that were completely worthless for my Lord Windgrace deck. And it's like, what's $60? It's like, my goodness. I remember when this was free. That's how I felt about a lot of cards.
Sack my lands? Who would sack my own lands? Who wants to do that? What, are you insane? Are you crazy?
Right? Yeah. And I think that is kind of the big takeaway, is a lot of cards in the future could just be a card away. And I think that's what makes it so hard to speculate on. Is,
it's very hard to see into the future.
Yeah. For now.
Some might say impossible.
Some might say impossible unless you're opting 3 to 5 each turn and dealing arcane to people's faces. Then it's easy. It's the opting that's looking into the future. So we had one last topic to get to. And this is the reveal of a new hero that's going to be given to what appears to be invited cosplayers to the Pro Tour. And I'd like to start this off with a question from the world's luckiest man, winner of every raffle I have ever seen drawn in person, Mr. Hasiel Diaz. He
hasn't won every raffle, just 25 of them.
Just 25. Okay, there's still like 6 other raffles that he lost. And he actually won the Arsenal Pass giveaway. He's headed to the Pro Tour New Jersey. Congratulations, Hasiel. And he sent a question our way. He said, "Dear Pitch Stack, to cosplay or not to cosplay? That is the question. The new Taylor hero seems sick. So my question is, if you were to cosplay at the Pro Tour, what hero would you dress up as?"
Oh, man.
Well, so I have an easy answer.
What's your answer here?
I'm going to dust out my short jorts and go as Dash.
Oh, okay. Hell yeah.
Those cutoffs haven't been relevant since the 90s. But, it's like Arrested Development cosplay leads straight into Dash.
With the rolled up cuffs?
Exactly.
That's not a bad answer.
I think it's the closest to normal clothes, right?
Yeah, you can get like the goggles and like, a little futuristic steampunk pistol,
Exactly.
Dye your hair a little kind of like an auburn red.
Exactly. See, you get it.
I get it.
What would you do?
Ideally? Are you talking about what I would do if I just wanted to cosplay, or what would I do?
Money, no object.
Oh, money, no object. That answer is
what would you cosplay as?
Viserai.
Viserai?
I just love the goddamn design so much. Just could you imagine? I've thought about this so much. Could you imagine just like the whole like just a professional level design like cosplay, right? You pay somebody who creates cosplays like as much money as they needed to create all the armor with like all the moving parts, the cool like divots in the armor with like the glowing purple, right? And then the whole chest piece and the nebula blade and the helmet that can come off, right? That'd be so sick. And then underneath you can paint your face kind of like with the purple stripes that he has as the young hero and stuff, like the striations. And what would be even cooler is if the chest armor can open up like a little like door and you could see the Arknight shard on the inside.
Yeah.
Like you have like an Arknight shard piece there you can pull out kind of thing, and it can glow purple and shit. Like I've thought about this forever.
You just like call up John Mallow, who, not a household name, but he did design the vast majority of the armor and costumes for Star Wars.
Really? That'd be good.
Yeah. It's like, I got the guy that designed Darth Vader.
Or whoever's out here designing these Warhammer and Fallout power armor like cosplays and stuff, the ones that have beeping and lights and shit and like open up and have like motors that, move like parts and stuff, like, yeah. That's the guy to talk to.
I feel like it's just funny. You just got like one of those people on YouTube that's like, look at this cosplay I made. And it's like your entire house is a factory.
Yeah, I've got all these linens on this table over here. On the back table, I'll have a milling machine.
It's like, this was the easiest part. I soldered together this microprocessor that reads my eye twitches to display different patterns of lights. It's like,
so easy. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I'd mess up Viserai cosplay, and not just myself. I'd mess it up for other people too, because it would be so difficult for me to not talk like Bane from The Dark Knight. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but in my head, Viserai has like a weird voice where he's like, I don't know, where he's just like, I don't even want to do it.
What's your headcanon Viserai voice?
Oh, where he's just like, I don't know, like 12 arcane damage to you.
Oh my God.
I don't know. Like, he's doing like the full Bane in my head, because I mean, like, obviously his voice is messed up. Dude washed up on a beach and then like a giant floating head imbued him with dark magic. I don't think he's just like, hey, 12 arcane damage to your face, you know? Like,
definitely not with that podcaster voice.
Yeah, right.
No, I think he's got kind of like that machined, like covered up, because he's got like the face thing on the helmet.
Like a Kylo Ren deal?
Yeah, he's kind of talking through like a voice box sort of deal. Yeah, like Kylo Ren sort of style, but a little bit more strained and confused.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah, that's fair. That demonastery. It sure is. It sure is. What's the word I'm looking for? What? I don't know, but it starts with a D. I'm not going to remember it. Yeah, it sure is demonic. Exactly.
Diabolic.
It sure is demonic, diabolical, and disillusioning. All those things at once. So let's talk about this Taylor hero a little bit before we wrap up the show. Now, are we on the same page where, based on the wording, it appears that they're only giving this card out to invited cosplayers?
I think there will be some flexibility there, but I think that all invited cosplayers will probably get a copy.
And you think, yeah, I could see James White with like 20 of them in his pocket, just handing them out like Werther's originals. Like, just, it's like, that's a nice cosplay. Have a Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that. I don't think that they wouldn't do that. You know, the card for sure is beautiful. I love it. I wish I could get one without paying a bunch of money. I think that the cosplayers who put a lot of effort into the game definitely deserve it. You know, I mean, they take the time to actually look into the details of every card that has the image on it of the character, you know, and try to find like the best way to express that character. You know what I mean? And just, I don't know, just essentially represent that character. So, yeah, I mean, they put a lot of work and effort, so I think they deserve that. And I think that anyone who comes in to Pro Tour with a really sick cosplay that, you know, has put a lot of effort into it too, I think they deserve one as well.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw the full art, but there's like a corgi and a treasure chest.
Yeah.
And like, the art's so cool.
It is very cool. And apparently it's like, I don't know. I see people like zooming into the art and like cutting it out and looking at like certain pictures and stuff. Like maybe I think they're saying it's like based on somebody.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. Just there's too many like pictures in the background that are clearly like someone's life moments for it to not be like I don't know, maybe like I'd have to look into like the artist is Andy Aslamov. I'd have to look into his other art.
Oh, yeah.
And see if this is like, you know, a love letter to somebody he knows, or if it's supposed to be somebody that they're thanking for doing something for the community, because it's definitely interesting. And I think the card's super cool. It's almost like a Guardian.
It is.
Yeah, where you can just block with all the equipment ever printed, you know?
And then just swap it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, it seems busted. And so this leads to another question where, do you think that, I forget the bard's name, he's just Bardman. Do you think the bard, who I really will remember his name in the future,
Bjork.
Yes, Bjork the bard. So we've got the bard, we've got this new shapeshifter card. Do you think that they end up in the same category as Rudy Gemkeeper?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially where they are. So if anyone hasn't heard or read it before, no hero is legal for play that hasn't been printed in a actual set.
That's a huge relief.
Yeah. So if it hasn't been printed in a set, it's not legal to play in Blitz or CC. But of course, there is UPF, and of course, UPF is a casual format, and everyone can agree whether to let you shuffle their decks together or not. Obviously, probably not, or let you play Taylor, which it would probably only happen once. And they're like, "Yeah, that's busted. Don't do that."
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, I think Taylor would be fun to play. She seems cool. Of course, minus the card pool, you won't have access to any other cards besides generics. Well, actually, no. Weapons are equipment.
Oh yeah,
that's why it says. Yeah. That's why it says you cannot have more than one of any name. Different. It says you have to have a different name, so you can't be like Kadachi Taylor.
That makes sense.
Or
also to prevent
winner's whale.
Block with I don't know, block out with skull cap, bring in another skull cap.
Correct. Yeah.
Hit blade break on your tunic, bring in another one.
Well, actually, no, that won't work. It's a trigger at the start of your turn, so by the time you get around to that trigger, your blade break item will have been destroyed. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess you would have to use mostly battle worn equipment.
Right, or tempered only once.
Now, I wonder, with the facts that you just spat, which thank God, because for somehow I didn't read that, so that makes me feel a lot more comfortable about having to collect every playable hero. I wonder if they're gonna make new Dory and new Rhinar Blitz legal.
Oh,
isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, I actually didn't think about that.
I mean, they probably will if they want it to be like a starter set, right?
Yeah, I think they'd have to. I think they would have to. I think maybe it's like if it wasn't printed in some sort of product, it's not legal. That's going to be my interpretation of it. Because if it's just a promo handed out that was just generated, like for like Rudy's thing or the ones for the people who go to Pro Tour or the cosplayers, those cards are just given out. They're printed. Those I don't think should be legal. But the ones, anything put into a supplemental set or like an actual thing you buy, product you buy, I think those should be legal.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a ton of sense. And especially, it would just be weird to buy my dual decks. I've been playing for 2 weeks. I want to go to an armory. It's like, what do you mean?
I can't
I can buy one of these Blitz decks. They have banned cards. It would just keep getting worse. Cool. Well, so yeah, now I'm a little bit more excited about this Taylor card now that I know it's a collector piece. So,
yeah.
Matt, I think we covered about everything. Did you have anything else or perhaps some parting thoughts?
Well, Pro Tour New Jersey is right around the corner. Also, I'm very happy how CL won that Arsenal Pass giveaway. He had by far the most amount of votes, which is really sweet. Most amount of nominations. We really got together. And that was pretty special.
Right. And I feel like there's so many people I know, like myself included, where Hasiel helped them through their first armory or walked players through things. And I feel like he's done so much, at least for the South Florida Flesh and Blood community. It's really cool to send him up to New Jersey and, show him that South Florida probably has the most competitive meta in the world.
I think so, man. I really do. I agree,
Yeah, absolutely.
And Hasiel was grinding those PQs, man, and it's unfortunately he still can't get into Pro Tour without a PTR invite, but he at least gets to go to the calling on the backs of the Arsenal Pass, on the lovely gentleman on the Arsenal Pass, Hayden Dale, and I'm sorry. Help me out here, Doug.
The Brendan.
Oh
Brendan's
my God! I'm so sorry. I blanked on his name.
Hayden and Brendan.
Yes. I'm sorry, Brendan. If you ever hear this podcast,
that's why. So that's the thing. Podcasts, they're always first names. So that's why I always Brendan Patrick and Hayden Dale. But that's why I always shove my last name in like I'm famous or something. Like that way you remember.
It's Doug DeJong
and Matt Rodriguez. Exactly. Right on. Well, yeah, I think that does it for this week. This has been a pretty cool week. I thought it was going to be a slow news week.
No, I mean, we actually ended up getting quite a bit of content. It was actually good.
Absolutely. Well, with all that said, let's hope that next week is not a slow news week as we prepare for Pro Tour New Jersey. Maybe Flesh and Blood will strike while the iron's hot and try to distract some people from Magic spoilers with perhaps some hints to new sets or something to think about in the future.
Or spoilers for that dual deck already, please.
Yeah, right?
Something. I'm like getting the itches, you know?
Joe Reinar, even though he's not an orc yet, but maybe. We're going to make him an orc. We're going to make it change.org
let's
petition.
Go.
Orcs,
all right, guys.
Let's go. All right. I guess we'll see y'all next week.
Take care.